Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on the life divine, with, as always, our beloved Ranga. We are on page 652, continuing in the chapter, The Origin of Falsehood and Evil, and the sentence begins, "The true solution can intervene."
Chapter is the origin of evil and falsehood. And Srimad has already told us that there is no falsehood in the involution, but there is the distortion of falsehood and error come in the evolution upwards. And that too only at a particular point. And that point is the vital ego. The vital ego, when it starts, then the wrong action and error, and then wrong consciousness and wrong action, resulting in evil and falsehood comes in. So what is the solution? Since we are discussing that. So we will read the summary of the previous paragraph so that we can situate ourselves in the argument. The root of the problem is inconscience. But there is another obstacle to be considered. It is the division of the one into the many. This division into infinite multiplicity ends in ego and ignorance. Ego isolation of the individual causes ignorance, clash with others, leading to falsehood and evil. But also, let us note that the principle of division itself is multifarious. Sat, Chit, Shakti and Ananda all undergo division and limitation. Not only Sat, but also Chit, Shakti and Ananda. All undergo division and limitation. The healing, the wholeness, harmony has to be applied to all the four and not only to one. The division occurs first in matter, the atoms, and then in the vital, and finally in the mind. But the vital ego is the strongest of all, and it is here that falsehood and evil originate. Wrong consciousness engenders wrong will in mind, heart and sensation, which is the physical vital. Wrong will engenders wrong action on all of them, mind, heart and sensation. We do not know how to deal with others, being ignorant of their needs, and their needs of what? Needs of soul, needs of mind, needs of vital, and even the need of the body. So long as others are strangers to us, the clash and disharmony with them will persist indefinitely. Some enlargement of the nature, sympathy, and compassion for others can help. It does not solve the problem, which is basic harmony. This broadening of mind, life, may help in avoiding bigger problems, but minor problems will always exist. Altruism, philanthropy are good for progress, but being based in egoism cannot be the solution of harmony that we seek. In fact, the ego of the virtuous man, the do-gooder, the altruist, the self-righteous man can be much larger than that of the selfish, the sinner. The latter may be much less rigid in their nature than the virtuous man with his inflexibility of goodness, righteousness. Again, let us note that self-denial, self-annulment, which is the opposite of altruism and all. Self-denial, self-annulment, self-immolation, going overboard to help others can harm oneself in soul, in mind, in vital. Of course, self-sacrifice is a necessary law in life, but it has to be practiced in right proportion and with knowledge and not ignorance. The right of self-development and self-enlargement is legitimate and must be taken into account in our dealings with others. To develop oneself in sattvic nature, away from rajasic and tamasic nature, is a rightful claim. But all these are only stages in the evolutionary journey. This is what he has said. So now we will read the text that we have to read today. So what is the solution? Now Swami is dealing with it. Very clear statement. The true solution can intervene only when, by our spiritual growth, we can become one self with all beings, know them as part of ourself, deal with them as if they were our other selves. For then the division is healed, the law of separate self-affirmation, leading by itself to affirmation against or at the expense of others, is enlarged and liberated by adding to it the expense of others.
By adding to it the law.
By adding to it the law of our self-affirmation for others and our self-finding in their self-finding and self-realization. We'll go through it again later. It has been made a rule of religious ethics to act in a spirit of universal compassion, to love one's neighbor as oneself, to do to others as one would have them do to us, to feel the joy and grief of others as one's own. But no man living in his ego is able truly and perfectly to do these things. He can only accept them as a demand of his mind, an aspiration of his heart, an effort of his will to live by a high standard and modify by sincere endeavor his crude ego nature. It is when others are known and felt intimately as oneself that this ideal can become a natural and spontaneous rule of our living and be realized in practice as in principle. But even oneness with others is not enough by itself. If it is a oneness with their ignorance, for then the law of ignorance will work and error of action and wrong action will survive, even if diminished in degree and mellowed in incidence and character. Our oneness with others must be fundamental, not a oneness with their minds, hearts, vital selves, egos. Even though these can come to be included in our universalized consciousness, but a oneness in the soul and spirit, and that can come only by our liberation into soul awareness and self-knowledge. To be ourselves liberated from ego and realize our true selves is the first necessity. All else can be achieved as a luminous result, a necessary consequence. That is one reason why a spiritual call must be accepted as imperative and take precedence over all other claims, intellectual, ethical, social, that belong to the domain of the ignorance. For the mental law of good abides in that domain and can only modify and palliate. Nothing can be a sufficient substitute for the spiritual change that can realize the true and integral good, because through the spirit we come to the root of action and existence. So,
very clear. Very clear.
Yeah. So, if it is clear, then we go on to the next para.
Somewhat like Christ.
Pardon?
Some of the words similar to Christ.
Yeah.
At the bottom.
Yeah, because after all, Christ was an avatar.
Yes, yes.
Spirituality is not the monopoly of any one group or any one nation. It is something that is available to all mankind. I read the next. I'll do one thing. I'll read the summary of what he's saying here.
Okay.
So, The religious and ethical solution are all insufficient, and finally they are only palliatives. Now, palliatives means temporary solutions, not permanent solutions. The real solution is only when one loses one's ego in the Brahmic consciousness, the self, and enters the cosmic consciousness. In that cosmic consciousness, one feels and sees and experiences oneself as one with all others. All others are essentially oneself, not separate individuals. It is then that evil can disappear. So, cosmic consciousness is not an abstract concept, it is something very real. We'll give two examples so that it becomes concrete. Okay, so there is one, I should have brought those, some sonnets of those. Okay, he says, in one sonnet he says, to whichever person I turn, I see myself with another face. So that is what you feel yourself to be. There is also another experience of a person who had the cosmic consciousness. He is walking along a road and 100 meters ahead of him, there is somebody else walking. Suddenly he feels that he is that person. His body is here, but he feels that he is walking there 100 meters ahead of him. That's another example of cosmic consciousness. And the best example is, even at a body level, the yogi who sees an animal being whipped,
that feeling,
and he gets the whip lashes on his own back. So there is an identification with everything around him. So this is cosmic consciousness. There are many other cases also in the ashram. Okay, one case was there. It's a little negative, but it will explain the cosmic consciousness. There was a person who had come from Sweden, and she used to teach our women, the girls. She used to teach them calisthenics, okay? Group activities together like mass drill. So she was doing that. But one day she was ill in Golconda. And mother, she used to be in the playground at that time. But when she thought of this person, she had a feeling of nausea. And then later on we came to know that this person was vomiting in Golconda. And mother identified herself with that person, and she had to suffer the same symptoms. This is cosmic consciousness. Okay, so but in the intra now, he is talking of the, so you have to go to the self. And what is the self? It is, to put it in very practical terms, you have to go outside your body, mind, life. Your soul consciousness must feel that you are outside my body. Right now we feel that my consciousness is in the body. At that point, when you are in the self outside your body, you will feel that your body is in your consciousness, a small dot. That is the losing of ego, and that is a cosmic, not necessarily cosmic consciousness, but in the self. You can be in the self without a cosmic consciousness. Going to the self does not necessarily give you a cosmic consciousness. Okay. Now, you can get this feeling of cosmic consciousness in the intra-conscient also. The intra-conscient is at a horizontal level, and the spiritual self is at a vertical level, outside your body, mind, life, transcendent. And this is cosmic. So now he is talking of that. But in the intra-conscient, the subliminal, a sense of oneness with others is possible. But nevertheless, that inner region, however much enlarged in knowledge, it still is a region of ignorance also. A oneness with all others in ignorance is not a solution, because ignorance breeds wrong will and wrong action, ending in falsehood and evil. It is only in the self, the spiritual reality, that evil and falsehood disappear. So very clear, cosmic consciousness in the intra-conscient is not enough, because the intra-conscient is a region of knowledge, but it's also a region of ignorance. Whereas in the spiritual planes, the ignorance is not there. There can be limitation of knowledge, but not ignorance as such. Okay. Now, there is another way of religion. Religion tells you to do to others as you would like them to do to you. So, religion urges man to love his neighbor, do unto him as he would want them to do to oneself. But this is only an ideal, hardly ever realized in the lower hemisphere. Only the spiritual planes, higher mind, eleventh mind, intuitive mind and overmind, make that ideal practicable. That is the reason why the spiritual call to man must take precedence over all other demands and duties. Call of friend, call of family, community, or even nation. Now, this is an interesting point because Sri Ranganath faced this in his own life. He was accused of not taking care of his family. Then in the synthesis he has said that there are gradations of responsibility. Like the chapter is the standards of conduct. When you are in the normal consciousness of man, your ego is valid. You have to develop yourself through ego. Ego is the helper. But then a time comes when your ego will clash with other egos, so society steps in and society says the social law comes into being, not the ego law. So first is the ego law, second is the social law. Society says this you can do, this you can't do. That's the second standard. The third standard is the individual tells himself and others what he can do and what should not be done. That's morality. So that's the third level. And the fourth level is no laws at all. Spiritual chaos, if you want, not chaos, spiritual anarchy.
That's what Mother wanted in Oroville. She said, I want it to be a spiritual anarchy.
Yeah. But that's not practical at this level. It's not possible at this level.
But no laws at all. She wanted no laws at all.
That's the ideal.
That's the ideal.
That's the ideal. And the first thing is not to have a police force, which is already there in Oroville. Oroville, you don't have a police force.
No.
But you have volunteers who try to keep the peace. Anyway, so now we can go to the next para. In the spiritual knowledge of self, there are 3 steps of its self-achievement, which are at the same time 3 parts of the one knowledge. The first is the discovery of the soul, not the outer soul of thought and emotion and desire, but the secret psychic entity, the divine element within us. When that becomes dominant over the nature, when we are consciously the soul, and when mind, life and body take their true place as its instruments, we are aware of a guide within that knows the truth, the good, the true delight and beauty of experience, and beauty of existence, controls heart and intellect by its luminous law, and leads our life and being towards spiritual completeness. Even within the obscure workings of the ignorance, we have then a witness who discerns, a living light that illumines, a will that refuses to be misled and separates the mind's truth from its error, the heart's intimate response from its vibrations to a wrong call and wrong demand upon it, the life's true ardor and plenitude of movement from vital passion and the turbid falsehoods of our vital nature and its dark self-seekings. This is the first step of self-realization, to enthrone the soul, the divine psychic individual, in the place of the ego. The next step is to become aware of the eternal self in us, unborn and one with the self of all beings. This self-realization liberates and universalizes. Even if our action still proceeds in the dynamics of the ignorance, it no longer binds or misleads, because our inner being is seated in the light of self-knowledge. The third step is to know the divine being, who is at once our supreme transcendent self, the cosmic being, foundation of our universality, and the divinity within, of which our psychic being, the true evolving individual in our nature, is a portion, a spark, a flame, growing into the eternal fire from which it was lit and of which it is the witness, ever living within us, and the conscious instrument of its light and power and joy and beauty. Aware of the divine as the master of our being and action, we can learn to become channels of his Shakti, the divine puissance, and act according to her dictates or her rule of light and power within us. Our action will not then be mastered by our vital impulse or governed by a mental standard, for she acts according to the permanent yet plastic truth of things. Not that which the mind constructs, but the higher, deeper, and subtler truth of each movement and circumstance, as it is known to the supreme knowledge and demanded by the supreme will in the universe. The liberation of the will follows upon the liberation in knowledge and is its dynamic consequence. It is knowledge that purifies, it is truth that liberates. Evil is the fruit of a spiritual ignorance, and it will disappear only by the growth of a spiritual consciousness and the light of spiritual knowledge. The division of our being from the being of others can only be healed by removing the divorce of our nature from the inner soul reality, by abolishing the veil between our becoming and our self-being, by bridging the remoteness of our individuality in nature from the divine being, who is the omnipresent reality in nature and above nature. So, we'll quickly go through each sentence. Okay, so first of all, we must know that he is saying that this true solution can come in 3 steps. First is the psychic realization of the psychic within yourself. And he has given a wonderful description of what that psychic being will result in. That we will see. The second is the rising vertically into the spiritual consciousness of the self, the Brahman, and there also there are 4 levels. There is the higher mind, illumined mind, intuitive mind, and overmind. All these constitute the second level of the spiritual planes of consciousness. The third is the transcendent outside the universe. The second is in the universe, but above body, mind, life. Okay. The last is the transcendent consciousness, or what Sri Aurobindo calls the Ishvara consciousness, and in the Gita it is the Purushottama consciousness. These are aspects of the transcendent. The transcendent need not be the Purushottama necessarily, okay, nor the Ishvara. Because you can feel yourself to be outside the universe, concentrated only in the divine being. The words are there, we'll point out the words correctly. Okay, so these are the 3 steps he is suggesting and their results. So, in the spiritual knowledge of self, there are 3 steps of its self-achievement, which are at the same time, 3 parts of one knowledge. The first is the discovery of the soul, not the outer soul of thought and emotion and desire, which he calls the desire soul. It is not the desire soul. There is a soul which was understood in the earlier days when occultism was being practiced and other knowledge of the occultism was getting known, was becoming wide. They thought that the emotional mind, the emotional vital, and the emotional part of you is the soul. But that's not the soul. The soul is much deeper, it's a psychic being within you. Much deeper. So Sri Aurobindo makes a difference between desire soul and the psychic being. Okay. So when he is talking of he's saying the outer soul of thought and emotion and desire, he is meaning the surface desire soul. But the secret psychic entity, the divine element within us, the psychic is a part of the divine. When that becomes dominant over the nature, now the consequences of what the psychic transformation means. When we are consciously the soul, and when mind, life and body take their true place as its instruments, we are aware of a guide within that knows the truth, the good, the true delight and beauty of existence. Beauty of existence, which includes everything, good, bad, everything, controls heart and intellect by its luminous law and leads our life and being towards spiritual completeness. Even within the obscure workings of the ignorance, we have then a witness, this is a psychic being, who discerns. Now, usually the word witness is reserved for the self, but Srimati is using the word witness here for the psychic being also, because it sees clearly what is right and what is wrong. Who discerns, discriminates, okay. A living light that illumines, a will that refuses to be misled and separates the mind's truth from its error. So, the psychic being can see the truth and the falsehood. It can very clearly distinguish between them, although the body-mind life may not be able to obey it. That is a stage when you know what is right and wrong, yet you don't have the power to do the right. Okay? This also is there. That's what he's pointing out. Okay? He's saying, although we are in the ignorance, a will that refuses to mislead and separates. The life's true ardor and plenitude of movement from vital passion and the turbid falsehoods of our vital nature and its dark self-seekings. Self-seekings, doing things for yourself. This is the first step of self-realization, to enthrone the soul, the divine psychic individual, in place of the ego. The next step is to become aware of the eternal self in us, unborn and one with the self of all beings. So, self of all beings, again, the cosmic consciousness. You feel yourself to be one with everybody else's self. You see yourself in everybody else, and you see everybody else also in you. There is in the Upanishads you have the description, the one in the many in the one, and the one becoming the many. So these are the three experiences that you can have. Srirendra uses the words apprehending consciousness, comprehending consciousness. Apprehending consciousness, you feel yourself to be one in everybody. Oh, I am there. I am here also, here, this is me. And the other is you see the whole world within yourself. That's a comprehending consciousness. Okay? There are very good examples of that. In one of sonnets, Srirendra says, the entire universe is Arcturus and Belsvagar burn within me, he says. The largest stars in the universe are burning within him. Or the wonderful image of Sri Krishna when he is a baby. He is eating mud. And his mother comes and says, what are you saying? Open your mouth, I want to see what you are eating. He opens the mouth and she sees the whole universe within his mouth. The example of the cosmic consciousness. Okay, so the self of all. This self-realization liberates and universalizes. That means you are not limited to the body, mind, life alone. Your consciousness becomes as vast as the universe. This self-realization liberates and universalizes. Even if our action still proceeds in the dynamics of the ignorance. Now note that. You have got the psychic consciousness, but still your body, mind, life are not obeying the psychic. So, this is the example. Even if our action still proceeds in the dynamics of the ignorance, it no longer binds or misleads, because our inner being is seated in the light of self-knowledge. The third step is to know the divine being. Now, since they use the word divine being, he sometimes uses the word the divine in himself. The divine in himself is the transcendent, excludes the universe and the individual, or the divine in the cosmos is the cosmic divine, and the divine in the individual. So, Srimati is using the word here, divine being, who is at once our supreme transcendent self. So he is the divine being who is supreme transcendent self, the cosmic being, the foundation of our universality, and the divine within. So you have got three levels here. The transcendent divine being, he is a cosmic being, he is also in the universe, but is also in the heart of every creature in the universe. That is transcendent, cosmic, and individual. Now there is one point here, one must not make a mistake, that the divine in everything is not the psychic being. The next makes that very clear. Okay, so this we read. Apart from the psychic being, which is a part of the divine, there is the divine himself who is there in each creature. Okay, so the third step is to know the divine being who is at once our supreme transcendent self, the cosmic being, foundation of our universality, and the divinity within, of which our psychic being, the true evolving individual in our nature, is a portion. Very clearly he is telling you that there is a divinity within you and your psychic being is a portion of that. So he is making a difference. It refers back to the Gita's Ishvara Sarva Bhutanam Hriddesha Tishtati. The divine, the Ishvara, is there in the heart of every creature. And it is he who makes the machine of body, mind, life turn as though mounted on a wheel. So very clearly a difference is there between the psychic being and the divine presence behind everything. Because the divine presence is there in a stone also. But the stone doesn't have a psychic being. So very clearly the psychic being is a part of the infinite divine who is there present in you. That's the divine presence. So this makes it very clear that the two are different. Okay, so it was a problem that was bothering me, that's why I am pointing it out. Okay, is the psychic being the supreme? It is not the supreme. It's a portion of the supreme. Okay, so Ansha Sanatana is the word used in the Gita. Okay, so psychic being, the true evolving individual nature, is a portion, a spark, a flame, growing in the eternal fire, growing into the eternal fire, from which it was lit, and of which it is the witness, ever living within us, and the conscious instrument of its light and power and joy and beauty. So when you have the psychic consciousness, these are available to you, the light, power, joy and beauty. Aware of the divine as the master of our being and action, we can learn to become channels of his Shakti, the divine puissance, and act according to her dictates. Now he is using the word her, the Shakti. The Shakti is usually seen as a feminine aspect of the divine. Chit Shakti. Chit is Purusha, the masculine aspect, and Shakti is the feminine aspect. Why? Because it is executive. The Purusha is static. His role is static. He only permits, but doesn't do anything himself. It's his Shakti which does everything by herself, and that is why so feminine and masculine is only a way of talking to explain to ourselves. Okay? There is no gender in the highest level. Mother has said very clearly that she could see her body which is genderless. It is absolutely without gender. Okay, so but that helps us to understand. Okay, so and demand of supreme, for she acts according to the permanent yet plastic truth of things. Now note that she acts according to the permanent yet plastic truth of things. The truth is permanent, but it's not fixed, it is plastic. Okay, so it's not rigid, demanded by the Supreme. Not that which the mind constructs. The constructions of the mind are things which can be dissolved. If anything is constructed, it can be dissolved. So all our ideas are all constructions. Okay, so this is explained also in Indian philosophy, that when you think of a mountain, your mental substance is actually forming a mountain. Okay, so you are creating something mentally. So if you are creating something, it can be uncreated also. So all mental constructions have no value. They are impermanent. That's what Sandra is mentioning. Okay, so not that which the mind constructs, but by the higher, deeper and subtler truth of each movement and circumstance, as it is known to the supreme knowledge and demanded by the supreme will in the universe. The liberation of the will follows upon the liberation in knowledge, and is its dynamic consequence. It is knowledge that purifies. This is almost a phrase taken from the Gita. Okay, the knowledge that purifies, and it will disappear only by the growth of the spiritual consciousness and the light of spiritual knowledge. The division of our being from the being of others can only be healed by removing the divorce of our nature from the inner soul reality. Our nature is the body-mind life, and the body-mind life is not at all aware of the soul reality. By abolishing the veil between our becoming and our self-being. So again we have a becoming and a self-being. The self is being. What is being? A static condition. And the becoming is a dynamic condition, constantly moving. So the spiritual, whether it be the self or the divine element within us, it's a being. But the becoming is the body-mind life. Okay, so spiritual knowledge. The division of our being from the being of others can only be healed by removing the divorce of our nature from the inner soul reality, by abolishing the veil between our becoming and our self-being, by bridging the remoteness of our individuality in nature from the divine being who is the omnipresent reality in nature and above nature. The omnipresent reality in nature is the divine presence in nature, but he is also above nature, that's a transcendent. So so what he is saying very clear, the true solution to falsehood and evil can come only when you, number one, realize your soul. Number two, realize yourself. Number three, realize the divine being. So, we read the next para?
Yes, and we'll complete.
Okay. But the last division to be removed is the scission between the nature and the supernature, which is the self-power of divine existence. Even before the dynamic knowledge ignorance is removed, while it still remains as an inadequate instrumentation of the spirit, the supreme Shakti or supernature can work through us and we can become aware of our workings. It is then by modification of our light and power so that it can be received and assimilated by the inferior nature of the mind, life and body. But this is not enough. There is needed an entire remolding of what we are into a way and power of the divine supernature. There is a distinction between nature and supernature. We will discuss that. The integration of our being cannot be complete unless there is this transformation of the dynamic action. There must be an uplifting and change of the whole mode of nature itself, and not only some illumination and transmutation of the inner ways of the being. An eternal truth consciousness must possess us and sublimate all our natural modes into its modes of being, knowledge and action. A spontaneous truth awareness, truth will, truth feeling, truth movement, truth action can then become the integral law of our nature. So this is the end of book 2, part 1. The next is the book 2, part 2. And what is that? The knowledge and the spiritual evolution. So what is the final solution for the abolition of evil and falsehood? Rise from your normal ego consciousness and conscious ignorance, realize your soul, realize the self and realize the divine above. Okay? And that is the supramental. When he is using the words truth awareness, truth will, truth feeling, truth movement, truth action can then become the integral of our nature. He is meaning the supermind. He has not used the word openly, but that's the supermind. Whenever he uses the word truth consciousness, okay, he means the supermind. So, only in the supermind is it possible. Now he is making a distinction also between nature and supernature. So which is nature and which is supernature? We come back to the concept, they don't speak of three levels, but to make our understanding more clear, we can use these three levels. Very clearly the three levels are there. Level 1 is our normal consciousness, when I am identified with my body, mind, life. I think this is what I am, and I feel myself to be separate from everybody else. Level 1, it is ignorance and based on ego and separation. Level 2, you lose your ego, you lose your feeling of separation, you are outside your body, mind, life. That's the spiritual planes of consciousness, which Srivastava calls you are still in nature, but it is the supernature is the third level where you go outside. And even the spiritual consciousness is not enough, because it can still be, there can be limitation. Only when you go to the supramental level do you have the power to change everything down below. That is where you have to go, and when you go there, the problem of evil and falsehood is solved. Solved for whom? Solved for the person or the community which has gone to that level. Has it been effaced from the world? No. So when will that be effaced? That when the supramental race will come, it will be, evil and ignorance will be, and evil and falsehood will be removed for that community.
Yes.
Not for the rest.
Exactly. And that could be a small percentage of the world.
So that is what he will now go to, the solution, rising. How will it be removed in the physical world? It will be removed, and that's why the third part of the Life Divine, Book 2, Part 2, the knowledge and the spiritual evolution.
But I want to ask you more about the last paragraph.
Yes.
About how the Divine Mother can work in us even in our ignorance. He says, even before the dynamic knowledge ignorance is removed,
yes,
while it still remains as an inadequate instrumentation of the Spirit, the Supreme Shakti or supernature can work through us.
Yes. So what is that? So that's exactly why I am speaking of the three levels. When you go to level 2, that's what he is speaking about. When you go to level 2, when you know that you are not the body, mind, life, you are the self, and you are watching below, but you don't have the power to do anything there. But a little bit of power can come. That's what is meaning by this. Some amount of power is there. You can purify your own mind. You can maybe purify even your vital to a certain extent. But you can't do anything about the limitations of the body. The body is bound to disease and death.
Yes, but my question is more the mother's working on level 1.
Yes, she was. But the work is unfinished.
Was she working on us also on level 1?
No. She is doing it only on herself, and when it is done at one point, it becomes common property of everybody else. It's exactly like in science. One man discovers the mobile. Only one man. But now it becomes common property to everybody else. So when mother realizes the divine consciousness in her body, it becomes a representative of the body of mankind. So she was working on her own body, but she was not working for herself. She is working for mankind, but working on her own body.
So, excuse me, but we are reading Life Divine.
Yes.
We are reading Synthesis.
Yes.
Sri Aurobindo is not helping us to understand?
He is helping you by all means. Mother also
in the ignorance?
Yes.
That's my question.
The question is, they are helping you all the time.
Yes.
But are you receiving?
I think occasionally, yes.
No, you are not receiving fully.
No, I didn't say fully.
I am saying.
Partially, perhaps.
Yes, that's why people have experiences.
Exactly.
You have experiences, but that's not enough to change you.
No, it's not enough.
That's what
That wasn't my
It's
question.
exactly like your question I've understood. Okay? Partly you may, but you are not going to solve the problem at your level.
Correct.
Even mother did not solve the problem fully.
Yes, very correct.
The thing is this, there is a lighthouse. It is giving light all the time to everybody. When there is a storm at sea, the ship may not be able to get the light from the lighthouse. So it depends on which condition you are. The radio is frequency modulated, FM. It is beaming all the time. Are you receiving it on your radio? You are not. You have to tune in. And tuning is what is receptivity. So the answer to your question is, how receptive are you? This is also a question which one of my co-students in the synthesis, in the Gita class, she asked. So if the divine can do all these things, why is he not helping me? But who said he is not helping you? He is helping you all the time.
Exactly.
Narad asked the same question to Sri Aurobindo and said, why aren't you helping me? He said, I have stretched out my hand to you. Hold my hand and pull, I'll pull you up. But you are not grasping my hand. That's what he says.
This is very important.
Yeah.
Very important.
We must never fool ourselves that we are receiving and we are at a higher level. We are not able to receive. There are moments when you receive, and that's an experience. But that experience is only temporary.
Small thing.
After a certain time, you are back to your own normal self.
So in my poetry, when I'm writing poetry, I am feeling his influence
Oh, yes.
very clearly.
Yes.
In
But when you are
fact,
not receiving a poetry,
Pardon?
when you are not receiving a poetry, are you receiving a poetry all the time?
No,
24 hours?
no.
Then? So at that time you are not receiving the poetry. And mind you, poetry is not the consciousness of right and wrong. That's another thing.
Correct. I'm speaking partially.
Yes. That's exactly what I mean, that you receive sometimes. You do receive. And that's when you are open, when you are receptive. But when you are, most of the time we are not receptive. Our doors are closed. There is a phrase, I think, in all religions, knock and the door shall open. Are you knocking? You are not knocking. They are helping all the time, but we are not receiving. When you receive, okay, with clarity, it's an experience. Suddenly it comes.
So you say that you are not receiving
Yeah,
yourself.
that's right. We are not receiving.
Not we're, you.
Not receiving. We are all in ignorance.
Okay, all right.
Where are we receiving? And you can see, very interesting, there is a man and the evolution, there is a facsimile. Now, Sri Aurobindo is receiving directly and he is written down. Then why is he correcting again? It's full of corrections. So there are levels of receptivity also, even for Sri Aurobindo and Mother.
Yes.
Savitri also he was going on correcting.
Yes.
So somebody asked him,
Yes, I know.
they said that the inevitable word, he has used the inevitable word. But then why are you correcting? He says it's the same process. When I am correcting, the correction comes through.
Yes.
So it's a very complicated thing. Spiritual life is not very easy and not a straightforward thing. It's not like A, B, C, D, E, F. No. Much more complicated than that.
Thank you.
Shamdas is about modern psychology in the West. He says it's at a level where it is at this level, CAT cat, BAT bat. They are at that level. Okay, we stop for today.
Very good. Thank you, Ranga. It was a wonderful chapter, and we learned a lot. Namaste. In our next meeting on Saturday, we will begin chapter 15, Reality and the Integral Knowledge.